This is you, 12 years in major crimes, and you've earned every sleepless night the job handed you. While other detectives angle for clean cases with clean paperwork and clean endings, you take the ones that arrive already bleeding through the file. You're the one they send when the timeline is broken. The witnesses are scared, and the department needs someone to separate what happened from what people are willing to admit happened. You're good at hearing the hesitation before a lie fully forms. Good at watching a suspect answer the question they wish you asked instead of the one sitting on the table between you. It's not instinct, it's repetition. It's years of learning that guilt has a rhythm and fear has one too, and most people can't hide either for very long. The work takes up almost all the available space in your life, which saves you from noticing how little is left over. Your apartment still has a dining chair with shirts draped over the back because you never quite moved in after the last place. Your last relationship ended in a parking garage at midnight when he told you he was tired of competing with dead strangers for your attention. He said every victim got the version of you that the living never seemed to reach. He wasn't entirely wrong. But there was Lena, your sister, 8 years older, who became something closer to a parent than a sibling by the time you were 11. Your father disappeared first. Your mother followed a year later, one overdose, one hospital quarter, one social worker with a folder already half filled out. Lena was 19. She had one semester of community college behind her, rent due in 5 days, and a kid's sister who still slept with the hallway light on. No savings, no backup plan, no relatives offering a couch and a miracle. Just 2 waitress jobs, a stack of envelopes she stopped opening, and you. She never once let you see Panicland. She found a way to keep you in the same school district. She learned how to argue for reduced lunch and after-school programs and fee waivers without letting you hear the word charity. She sat at the kitchen table every Sunday night and made your science flashcards even after working double shifts. When you made detective, she cried harder than you did. Her money always reached further than it should have for someone living on tips and hourly wages. You noticed that even then. The rent got paid too cleanly. The braces showed up too fast. The old Honda got replaced by a car that made no sense 6 months after she told you she was behind on utilities. The math was wrong in a way you trained yourself not to look at directly. You told yourself she was hustling, borrowing, getting lucky, finding help somewhere. You never pushed. You never asked where the help came from. The call comes in on a Thursday morning, 6:52, fog thick enough to turn the riverfront into a smudge of gray concrete and chain link. The body is under the pedestrian overpass near Pier 14, the kind of place where the city pretends cameras exist because no one important walks there after dark. Male, early 40s, laid out on his side with both hands zip-tied in front of him and a single stab wound driven straight up under the ribs. Clean work, not fast but controlled. No defensive cuts, no bruising across the knuckles, no gravel in the palms. He didn't fight. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe by the time the blade went in, he already understood the conversation was over. His pockets are turned out, wallet gone, phone gone. But his watch is still there, which tells you this wasn't desperation and it wasn't random. The killer took identity, not value. His name comes back as Victor Salcido. 2 priors, both low-level. Bookmaking. Possession with intent nearly a decade ago. No violence. No profile that explains a death this deliberate. Your partner gives the scene one pass and says it's probably a dead issue with a dramatic finish. He says it with the tone of a man mentally halfway to his second coffee. You keep looking. That's when the CSU tech mentions there was one thing tucked into the lining of the victim's coat. Missed because the seam had split and the fabric folded inward. It's a receipt, softened by rain and body heat, from a neighborhood grocery store on Alder Avenue. Timestamp 9:11 p.m. bought with cash. 3 items: bread, aspirin, and a jar of instant coffee. On the back, in blue ink, a single word: Lena. You stare at it for half a second too long. Nobody notices. Why would they? Lena is not a rare name. The city is full of women named Lena. You bag it, log it, and let procedure carry your hands for the next 10 minutes while the rest of you goes somewhere cold. Back at the precinct, you run the store address out of routine more than hope. Small independent market, family-owned, security system installed, but half the cameras flagged for intermittent failure. Of course, you call for the exterior footage anyway. It takes 43 minutes to transfer. Your partner is working through stale donuts from the break room by the time the clip loads. You watch Victor enter frame at 9:08. Hood up, hands in pockets. He goes inside. 3 minutes later, he walks back out carrying a plastic bag in one hand. Then he stops because someone is already standing beside his car. The image is grainy. Fog drifts through the parking lot like smoke. The person is a woman, average height, dark coat, hair pulled back. She steps close enough to say something through the driver's side window before Victor ever gets the door open. He turns toward her, not startled, not aggressive, familiar. Then the woman lifts one hand to tuck hair behind her ear, and the sleeve of her coat drops back just enough for you to see a bracelet catch the parking lot light. Thin gold chain, oval charm, tiny green stones set crooked in the center. Your stomach drops so hard it almost feels mechanical. Lena got that bracelet from you on your first paycheck in uniform. You bought it at a kiosk because it was all you could afford, and she wore it every day for 6 years until the clasp broke. She got it repaired twice instead of replacing it. You know the stone is set crooked because you picked the flawed one on purpose when the vendor said it gave the piece character. You told him that it sounded like a scam. Lena laughed for a full minute. You replay the clip 4 times. The face never clears. The bracelet flashes every time. Rationally, there are explanations. Jewelry gets copied, gifts get lost, sisters hand things down. Women with the same name exist in every zip code in the city. You build those explanations the way you build them for witnesses whose stories arrive bleeding from the edges, quickly, efficiently, in the order most likely to hurt the least. Then you write the preliminary report and describe the female contact as unidentified. You do not mention the name on the receipt beyond noting that it may refer to a personal associate. You definitely do not mention the bracelet. Your conscience calls you a coward before the report even finishes uploading. You should leave it there. You know how this ends when a detective starts treating a live case like a family autopsy. It doesn't end with a commendation. It ends with internal affairs, missing chain of custody, destroyed careers, maybe criminal charges if you're stupid enough to keep going. You know all of that. You keep going anyway. You call in a favor from an analyst in the fraud bureau who still owes you for quietly bearing his gambling debt from a corruption inquiry 4 years ago when the details didn't belong to your target and would have ruined his life for no investigative gain. He doesn't ask what the name is for. He just says he'll see what can be seen. 2 days later, you meet him in a parking structure 3 blocks from headquarters, and he hands you a thumb drive without getting out of the car. Victor Salcedo received 4 deposits over the last 8 months, 11,000, 9,000, 13, 10, small enough to hide inside contracting invoices if no one is looking too hard. All routed through the same property maintenance company registered out of Nevada with a local mailing office and exactly 1 employee on paper. Shell companies are everywhere. You spend half your life watching money wear a fake mustache. Normally, that wouldn't move you. Then you pull municipal permit records and find the company attached to renovation work on 3-row buildings in South Mercer. Lena owns one of them. Not outright, not under her own name, but the LLC that holds the deed shares a mailing address with the property maintenance company, and the signature on 1 permit application belongs to a notary whose office is 2 blocks from the bakery Lena has somehow managed to keep open for 7 years. In a neighborhood that eats small businesses alive. You tell yourself proximity is not proof. Cities are small when you start looking at paperwork hard enough. Then your CI calls. He moves pills, rumors, and envelopes between people too cautious to text each other directly. He's useful because he talks to everyone and belongs to no one. He says Victor met with someone 3 nights before he died at a backroom card game above a tavern on Ellison. The woman running the room wasn't a regular. Late 30s, calm, nice coat. The kind of face people underestimated once and corrected immediately. He says she had a white scar running along the inside of her left wrist, thin as string. You set your coffee down carefully so it doesn't tip. Lena got that scar at 22, opening a bakery oven with a busted hinge. Second-degree burn. She joked it looked like somebody had tried to draw a bracelet with a knife. You were the one who drove her to urgent care. You remember the smell of antiseptic and sugar still clinging to her sweatshirt? You go home and you do not sleep. At 1:14 a.m., you open your laptop and use a credential set you swore after the Nolan review you'd never touch again. Off book. Unlogged if you root it right. Career ending if you don't. You pull Lena's financials, then her property records, then the vendor history tied to the bakery, then the tax IDs attached to two suppliers who only exist as paper walls between cash and legitimacy. What comes back is not a bad year or a desperate compromise. It is architecture. Lena has been moving money for at least 9 years. Not recently. Not because the bakery hit a rough patch. Not because inflation got mean and rent got cruel. 9 years takes you back past your promotion to detective, past the year you bought your first condo, and she insisted on covering half the closing costs as a gift, past the winter your appendix ruptured and the hospital somehow stopped sending bills after the second month, past your mother's funeral debt, where the numbers first go from suspicious to impossible. You remember asking if she'd taken out a loan. She told you not to worry about it. You were tired and grieving and grateful enough to let that answer stand. There was no loan. The bakery was never just a bakery. It was a wash point. Cash heavy, neighborhood trusted, open before dawn and after dark. Exactly the kind of business that can absorb dirty money a little at a time until nobody remembers what clean looked like. The maintenance company handled real estate flips used to park cash between collections. A vending supplier invoiced machines that didn't exist. A linen service billed restaurants that were already closed. The network touches gambling, extortion, fentanyl distribution, and debt enforcement from South Mercer to the riverfront. Lena is not adjacent to it. Lena built one of the quiet systems that let it breathe. Your sister didn't just do what she had to do to keep you fed. She spent nearly a decade helping clean the money of people who poisoned blocks, buried witnesses, and made survival itself more expensive for everyone trapped near them. The bakery where half the neighborhood buys birthday cakes is part of the machine. You sit in your car outside headquarters for 38 minutes without turning the engine off. Then you drive to the bakery. She's locking the front door when you pull up. The lights inside are low. Racks are empty except for tomorrow's bread proofing under cloth in the back. She looks at you once and doesn't ask why you're there. Her face does that quiet, terrible thing faces do when a person sees the exact conversation they've been avoiding arrive anyway. She unlocks the door and lets you in. No badge on the counter, no accusation, no performance. Just the smell of yeast and bleach and old heat, and the two of you standing in the darkened front room while the city passes outside without noticing that your entire life has just shifted a few inches off its foundation. After a minute, she walks to the office and back, sits down, and starts talking. It began the year your mother died. You were 11. Lena was 19 with no degree, no credit, no one willing to rent to a teenager with a kid in tow and no cosigner. A man who owned the building where she waitressed told her there were ways to make money fast if she could be useful and discreet. Pick up envelopes, deliver ledgers, let certain people use the bakery kitchen she started renting, nights out of for meetings no one wanted on their own property. She told herself it would bridge a gap. 1 month, maybe 2. Long enough to get stable. Long enough to keep you out of foster care. Long enough to breathe. She says this the way people state weather after the storm has already taken the roof. No plea for sympathy. No attempt to decorate the story into sacrifice. She knew even then that temporary money has a way of making permanent claims, but the rent got paid. Your school stayed the same. The funeral debt disappeared. When you got sick, medicine was there. When you made detective, she thought for one irrational second that maybe something good had come out of what she became. You let her speak until the room goes still. Then she keeps going, and this is where the story stops being about a scared 19-year-old girl grabbing the first rope thrown into deep water. Victor Salcedo worked collections for one branch of the operation. He'd been skimming, small amounts at first. Enough to tell himself he was borrowing, not stealing. Enough to make it 6 months before the discrepancy repeated in ways accountants for bad men are trained to notice. He got confronted. He denied it. Then he got frightened enough to start talking about names and routes and addresses to the wrong people. By the time the decision came down, Lena says, it wasn't really a decision at all. She says they did not ask her to kill him personally. She is careful with that sentence. So careful that you notice not only the distinction, but the effort of making it. She says her job was to get him to the parking lot behind Aldermarket because he'd answer her call and he wouldn't answer theirs. She was supposed to make him feel safe long enough for other people to arrive. She made the call. She wrote her name on the receipt because he was jumpy and she needed him certain it was really her. She stood beside his car in the fog while he rolled the window down. She kept him there for less than a minute. After that, she left. 3 hours later, he was under the overpass, and you were kneeling in river fog trying to read the last shape of his final decisions from the angle of his body. She tells you this in a voice so level, it almost stops sounding like confession and starts sounding like inventory. Fact, fact, fact. As if accuracy is the only dignity she still has any right to offer. You think that might be everything? It isn't. Last fall, there was a witness in a fentanyl conspiracy case, a kid from Dock Street, 24, low enough in the chain that prosecutors thought fear would keep him useful and anonymity would keep him alive. He gave a statement, then collapsed on the stand before trial prep was even over. Said he'd lied, said detectives pressured him, said he was unstable and angry and wanted attention. The case cratered so fast your unit barely had time to complain about it. At the time, you assumed he'd been paid off. Lena is looking at the flour dust caught in the cracks of the office floor when she says he wasn't bought. He got a video file sent to his sister's phone at 2:11 in the morning. She doesn't say what was in it. She doesn't say who sent it. She doesn't say what happened after. She doesn't need to. You've been doing this too long to miss the shape of a sentence when the middle has been cut out to spare everyone in the room from hearing it whole. You drive home mostly by memory. Your partner has called twice and left one voicemail asking why you're suddenly interested in permit records tied to a murder victim. Your lieutenant sent a text at 8:03 that says, "See me before briefing," with no punctuation, which somehow makes it worse. You read both and put the phone screen down on the passenger seat. Back at your apartment, you don't turn on the lights. The city glows weakly through the blinds. You sit in the chair by the window and think about being 11 years old with one parent gone, one parent buried, and Lena standing in a thrift store coat pretending the world was still made of things a person could survive cleanly if they just tried hard enough. You think about the school she kept you in, the medicine that appeared, the rent that got paid, the food, the heat, the years of your life that held together because she stepped into a darkness you benefited from without naming. Then you think about Victor in the parking lot, about a witness who wasn't bought, just broken in a more efficient currency, about the bakery, about every loaf of bread and birthday cake sold out of a storefront connected by paper walls to poison and fear, and men who call executions corrections. You think about the badge in your drawer and the apartment around you, and the career you built on a foundation partially poured by money that should have belonged to evidence lockers and grieving families in neighborhoods that never got the chance to stay whole. There is no version of this where you come out unstained. There never was. The moment you saw your sister's name on that receipt and chose procedure over truth, the clock started. Everything since then has just been distance measured from that first silence. You sit there in the dark until the city noise thins. Then you pick up the phone and dial.